Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to break down something really fascinating, a simple but powerful way to teach one of life's biggest values, honesty. All right, let's just dive right in. This is a challenge every parent and educator faces, right? How do you actually encourage kids to be honest? People have been looking into this for decades, but a recent study, well, it came up with a surprisingly simple and really powerful approach. So, you've got this international team of researchers from Hangzhou Normal University, Harvard, and the University of Toronto. And they were looking for a way to promote honesty that wasn't, complicated. They didn't want a bunch of reward systems or big changes. They wanted something simple, something you could just use in an everyday conversation. So, how did they test this? Well, they designed this really clever experiment that they called a knowledge test. But really, it was all about creating a specific moment of temptation for a little kid just to see what choice they would make. The setup itself was pretty simple. They took kids one by one into a private room at their kindergarten. The child would sit with their back to a table, and their job was to guess what a toy was, just by hearing the sound it made. So, the first couple of toys were super easy to guess. This gets the kid feeling confident, right? But then came the twist. For the very last toy, the sound had nothing to do with what the toy actually was. Imagine hearing a leaf blower, but the toy is a panda. It was basically impossible to guess without looking. And that's what set the stage for the real test. What would the child do when they were left all alone? Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. The researchers added one tiny but super important variable to the game. Right before the experimenter left the room, they'd say something specific to the child, a little message about how someone might feel if they peeked or if they didn't. And here's the first thing they found. Turns out, kids weren't all that worried about how a stranger would feel. When the experimenter, someone they just met, said they'd be happy or unhappy, it didn't really change whether the kids peeked or not. It just didn't seem to matter. But when that message was about someone the child actually knew well, everything changed. This was the key. That personal connection was absolutely crucial. The exact same words had a completely different effect when they were about, say, their teacher or their mom. And just look at the numbers for the 5- and 6-year-olds. In the group that didn't get any message, about 65% of the kids peeked. But for the kids who were told their teacher or mom would be unhappy if they peeked, that number dropped to just 37.5%. Think about that. It cut the peeking rate almost in half with just a single sentence. That's a huge deal. So that worked for the older kids. But the researchers wondered, what about an even younger group? Does the same logic hold up? So they ran the whole experiment again, this time with 3- and 4-year-olds, to see if their choices would be influenced in the same way. And when we look at the data for these little guys, the toddlers and preschoolers, it's different and honestly even more interesting. They definitely reacted to the emotional messages, but there's a little twist that tells us something really important about how a sense of right and wrong starts to develop. Okay, so for these younger kids, here's what happened. Telling them their mom would be happy if they were honest worked just as well as telling them she'd be unhappy if they cheated. I mean, look at this. In the control group, a whopping 80% of the kids peaked, but with either the happy or unhappy message, that number dropped way down. So for the little ones, both the positive and the negative messages worked. So, why the difference between the two age groups? Well, the researchers have a pretty good idea. It might be all about how parenting changes as kids get older. Think about it. With really little kids, parents are often praising the good stuff just as much as they're correcting the bad stuff. But as kids get a bit older, that focus often shifts more towards pointing out when they break the rules. This can make the older kids way more sensitive to messages about disappointing someone. Okay, so what's the big takeaway here for anyone raising or teaching young kids? It's that this research gives us a really simple, really powerful, and super easy to use tool to help encourage honesty. I mean, the study's own summary puts it perfectly. This isn't about some complicated system you have to set up. It's all about using that emotional connection a child already has with the important grown-ups in their world. So here's the bottom line. Just talking about how their actions might make you feel, that can be enough to guide a child's moral compass. It really shows that sometimes the most powerful tools we have are the simplest ones, our relationships and the feelings we share with each other. And just so you know, this explainer is brought to you by a really cool collaborative initiative between the Child Study Labs at the University of Toronto and the University of British Columbia. Their whole goal is to take important academic knowledge, just like this, and make it accessible to everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. This research really leaves us with a powerful idea to chew on, doesn't it? In a world that's just full of complicated parenting advice, maybe, just maybe, the most effective tool we have is simply sharing how a child's choices make us feel.